So one of the things I've noticed about this car is that it takes a very, very long time to warm up, particularly in these cold winter months that we're in at the moment. In fact, I can be driving for 15 or 20 minutes before I even see the needle move off the cold position. So that is pretty unusual, particularly for a petrol car. I have had diesel vehicles that take quite a long time to warm up, but that's because the engine block is usually quite a lot thicker, and therefore it takes longer to get up to temperature. But for a small 1.6 petrol, it really should warm up quicker than this. So my suspicion is that the thermostat is stuck open or partially open, and that means that the coolant has to route all the way through the radiator as well as through the engine, and on a cold morning that means that the car is going to take a very long time to get up to temperature. So my plan of action for today is to essentially change the thermostat. I do have this replacement thermostat which I bought recently. So to change this, what we need to do is remove the thermostat housing. That is down underneath the alternator, so it's very awkward to get to. So I think what I'm going to do is remove this alternator, get it out the way, and then that should give better access to remove the thermostat housing. So one thing I will have to do is remove all the coolant, but actually I was planning to change the coolant anyway because I don't know when this was last changed. There's no record of it in the service book, and quite possibly it's been there for a very long time. So I'm going to change that out anyway, and it seems like a good time to have a go at this thermostat at the same time. So the first thing we need to do is remove this power steering reservoir, and we also need to remove the coolant header tank as well because it has a clip that clips onto the front of the alternator here. So we can just basically get those out the way, and then we can start attacking the alternator. Right, so I've taken out the bolt there and moved this out of the way. This pipe, I think I can just keep this moved out of the way here for now. I'm not going to remove this tank for now because there's a lot of pipes that attach to it, and I don't think it's really going to help me all that much. Now, one thing to remember is because we're working on the alternator, we have to disconnect the battery because we don't want to have any random short circuits or sparks that could cause damage or even set the car on fire. So the next thing we need to do is slacken off the bottom bolt for this alternator. You can see it down there, and it's pretty awkward to get to because you've got these belts in the way and these other pulleys and whatnot. And then you've also got the side bulkhead here on this side, so you can't put in a longer extension. What I found was my normal ratchet was too short and it kept on fouling on the side of the pulleys. And my shortest extension made it too long, so then it didn't fit down into the gap between there and the bulkhead. So what I did in the end was I got a 1/2 inch socket, connected it to a 1/4 inch adapter, and then used that on my 1/4 inch ratchet, and that is about right in terms of the length that you need to get in there. So if you have some deep sockets, that would probably work too. I don't have any of those in 1/4 inch drive, so this seemed to work okay. So then at the top here you have these two bolts as well, which you also need to remove. This right hand one is actually not a bolt at all, it's a nut, and then there's a stud which goes in and is secured on this side. But in order to remove this, you have to get this off. And on the end here, you'll see it's got this, it's like a Torx bit, but it's the opposite of a Torx bit. You need a Torx socket to go on that. Now, I actually bought a set of Torx ratchet sockets, and it actually came with these ones as well, which are the opposite ones that go on here. So, yeah, you might need to get yourself a set of those. There we go. Right, so the next thing we need to do is remove these connectors from the alternator. We've got this earth connection here, and then this clip here, which has the other connections in it. Okay, so to remove this clip, what we need to do is push down on this tab on the side. And that will allow the clip to just come off there. Then we have this grounding terminal, which is just bolted on. So what we need to do next is remove the bottom bolt, and then we can hopefully pull the alternator out. I'll just remove this because I just put it back in loosely. And there we go. Alternator is out. Right, so now we can see the thermostat housing there. The thermostat is behind this bit, but this is all one plastic piece that needs to come off. So before we can go any further, what we need to do is drain the coolant. I have seen people do it without draining the coolant, but I think that's a little bit of a rubbish way to do it because you could end up with airlocks in the system. So I need to change this coolant anyway. So I'm just going to do that next. And then we've got 4 bolts. There's one here, one just under there. I can just feel it with my finger there. And then there's 2 more on this side. There's one just here and then one down at the bottom. So I think once we've removed these pipes, we should be able to access those and pull that off. Okay, so to remove the coolant, we have to remove this drain plug here down on the left-hand side of the radiator. And then we can just let the coolant drain out. Alright, so our coolant is draining there. Actually looks like it's in pretty good condition, so perhaps it was changed quite recently, but anyway, it doesn't really matter. So I'm going to now start attacking this housing, but the first thing we need to do is remove these 2 pipes at the front. So they just have these spring clips on them. Right, so it took a bit of cajoling, but I finally got the pipes off, and I've just tucked them out of the way so that I can hopefully now access these bolts and get this housing off. Right, moment of truth. Oh god, what a mess. Right, so this is what the part looks like when you take it out. As you can see, we've got 4 bolts here. All 3 of these are a real bastard to get to because there's just stuff in the way and it's just awkward. This one is the only one that's actually relatively easy to get to. But it is possible, as you can see. So now I'm just going to clean this up a little bit and then we'll take a look at the thermostat as well. God, that's so stuck in there. I don't know what the f is going on with this. They've used some kind of glue on this. I don't think that's supposed to happen. Come on, man. They put some sort of weird gunk on here. I don't know what the hell this is. Some sort of... maybe it's radiator stop leak? I don't know. Anyway, this is the old one. I don't know whether it's in good condition or not, really, but it does look a little different to the new one. Anyway, I'll put the new one in, we'll see what happens, and hope for the best. Alright, so I've cleaned things up a little bit around there. So now we are going to fit our new thermostat. So the thermostat needs to be fitted with the spring towards the engine. Right, so new thermostat goes in there. Right, so after a lot of fiddling, I've got the bolts tightened back up again. So now we can refit the hoses and then we should be able to refill the coolant. Right, so the pipes and the spring clips are back in place and everything is nice and tight. And I've also reconnected this clip that I took out of the power steering pump because that was just getting in the way. So if you do that, don't forget to put it back. So the next thing I'm going to do is refit the alternator because I want to be able to start up the car and get it up to temperature so that I can do the coolant. Right, so alternator is successfully back in place and I have refitted the belt. It was a little bit tight to push it over the pulley, but I actually didn't have too much trouble with it. I just had to really pull this down as far as it would go. And then what I did was I fitted the stud back first and used that as a locator, and then used that to guide this bolt back in on the other side, and then just tighten it back up and jobs are good in. And of course I've refitted these connections on this side as well. Okay, so I've now refitted the drain plug for the radiator, so now we can proceed with refilling the coolant. Right, so everything's back together, the car is back down off the stands, and now the last step is to refill the coolant. So the way you do that is you basically top it up using the expansion tank, and once all the bubbles have come out of the system, then you run the engine for a while until it gets hot, and then you keep topping it up, and after a while you should get to a point where the level stabilizes, and then you basically leave the car to cool off again and then top it up as necessary. And that's pretty much it. Right, so the engine is up to temperature now. The fan has cut in. It doesn't run for very long, but I think it's because it's a very cold evening, so it doesn't need to. But I think all is good. The temperature is remaining stable, the level in the expansion tank is staying stable. So I think we can call that job done, but I will come back and check this once the car has cooled down again and top it up if necessary. Right, so I've been driving this car for a couple of days now, and I have to say it is a lot better than it was. It does get up to temperature quicker now, although still a little slower than some other cars that I'm used to, but a lot better than it was. But the main thing I'm noticing is that once it is up to temperature, it sticks in this middle position absolutely perfectly. Before, it was kind of hovering sort of in the range between these sort of two markings here, and especially when it was cold, it actually very rarely got up to this middle point at all. But now it gets up to temperature quite nice and quickly, and then it just sticks in this position no matter how you're driving or what the outside temperature is. So I definitely think there was a problem with that previous thermostat, and I think that this new one is much, much better. So that, I think, is a successful job done, and we'll see you again on the next one. Cheerio.